Hi, guys. This is Dr. Scott Young, and today we have Jeremy Whaley coming in, and we're going to talk a lot of financial things that are really near and dear to your heart. I think you're going to like where we're going to go. Coming right up. Well, what's going on for you, man? What's happening in your life?
Hey, it's good to see you again.
I could see too. Yeah, we were just talking a little bit the other day. By the way, Jeremy does have a website. I want you to do me a favor, and we're going to talk about this in the end too. Please go sign up. I mean, sign up for it. Sign up through his website. Check it out, cause I'm going to talk. I'm going to do the Scott introduction for him because and he can say whatever he wants to. I'm not trying to, but I'm going to tell you, he's a friend of mine. He's an awakened guy. He understands the NESARA thing. He also is a financial guy, which is one of the most rare things out there. I mean, when you place all those things together, and he's a musician too, and I am too, since we're all both weird on that. But that kind of stuff gives you an answer for things that you can't always find because most financial people are blinded by the Fed and they can't see outside of the Fed. So that's really why I'm saying you can trust his information. So go and sign in. It's at jeremywhaley.com, right? You
Yeah,
okay with that?
jeremywhaley.com. And for the trading stuff is at trademaestro.com.
And Trade Maestro as well too. So, well, but jeremywhaley.com, you can kind of get to that, right? Because you can get the other site. Is that correct? Yeah. So, I mean, it's just an introduction in that way. And then there's a site. And I always kind of recommend, if you're looking at someone, check their sites out a little, see what they're saying and what they mean by that. So it gives you a perspective with that too. So, all right.
Thanks.
All right. Anything you want to say as an introduction anymore?
No, that was it's probably more than I deserve. So thank you.
Well, we'll see. Okay. All right. All right. So here's our first kind of statement that we looked at. So there is a recent expose by a famous truther. His name is and good line. Nick had done this real interesting expose, and he does a lot of these. By the way, he doesn't do just a couple of them. He actually does a gorgeous one with some of the information by Derek Johnson that is wonderful. And it will really give you a background on that stuff. So I'm telling you, he's got a real interesting perspective. He's one of the quietest speakers I know out there too. So it's a real interesting when you hear him talk, it's like he's almost whispering. So it's just funny. But what are your thoughts on the grifter infiltrator part of our movement with that?
Well, it comes from every side. I don't know too many of these people. So I know people that know people. So a lot of my information is secondhand. What I understand about the Nick guy is he's a good guy. He's actually here in Nashville apparently, and I've never met him. So, I think he's probably a good guy. The information, I think you're probably referencing that film about Phil, and it's public information. It's not like it was secret.
Sure.
And the thing is, for a lot of the people that are out there that are taking advantage of the community, there is information that's widely public. And it's just more important than ever that people, get focused on authentic people that are revealing the truth. And whenever stuff comes up that might conflict with that they actually say, you know what? I'm more interested in the truth than I am about confirming my bias. And that's the thing that I see happening over and over is people are getting a pass, and you can plug in whatever name you want. They get a pass because they confirm the bias that somebody has, but then nobody's looking to see if this is actually true. And that's the thing that bothers me more than anything, and really makes me, even though I am in the pursuit of truth, it makes me not really want to be part of the community of people that call themselves truthers.
Right.
Because it seems like they're more interested in confirming their bias than they are actually getting to the truth. And that just drives me crazy. So I think, the film that you're referencing, I think from what I can tell, everything was 100% authentic, and that was great. Yeah. But I think there's some other stuff, people do films that reveal, and it's not always authentic. So you really have to be discerning.
Right. So when you think about grifters and infiltrators, I mean, a grifter is someone who's looking at, looking at people's money out there and trying to pull off that. So he kind of uses his influence to, kind of steer his way into truth. Is that how you would place it? And well, talk a little about infiltrators and grifters more specifically, if you could.
Yeah, so I would associate kind of what you described. If somebody looks at a target market, we'll say, and says, "Hey, we're going to go after them and take them for all they're worth," that's a grifter. They're not really part of the community. But there's
Right.
people that are part of the community, and lots of them, and
Sure.
they monetize their platform, and I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I think they should.
Absolutely
What
fine.
what
Yeah.
listeners don't realize is it takes a lot of work to
Yes, it
do.
does.
There's a lot of overhead involved, and there's just a lot. And you look at some people that are out there that are doing 2 or 3 shows a day, it becomes their living. And so
Right.
one of the things that I've said to people who've, complained, "Oh, such and such is just in it for the money." Like, well, why do you do your job? Are you doing that for charity? Um, you know, it's like people they deserve to make a living, and they deserve, in my opinion, to make a healthy living. And if you provide a value above and beyond, you deserve to get paid above and beyond. I don't have any problem with the actual dollars that some people have made. What I have
Correct.
a problem with is being fake. What I have a
Right.
problem with is saying I am anti-child trafficking and they're raping 15-year-olds. I have a problem with people who say I'm against this and then they go do the very thing that they're doing, and they're literally just infiltrating a movement to say these people are dumb, they're blind, they will follow anything. And to that point, my warning to everybody is don't be the guy that follows everything, or the girl.
Right.
Look, everybody's been conditioned. And what they're really doing is they're abdicating the responsibility over to a third party. They're saying, well, I believe this person, so I'm going to trust them. And then they just blindly trust them. And that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah. See, Michelle Moore and I were talking one time recently about, we were more talking about infiltrators, but there are companies that are infiltrating using my image, Michelle's image. I mean, pick the person's image. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of them,
I've
and
had
they're
it too, and I'm not even that famous.
right. And yeah, I mean, my wife has, tons of these image points to get you to go in and buy, QFS, crypto, which doesn't even exist.
Well,
Okay.
Trump is the worst one. They've taken Trump and
Oh yeah.
they'll superimpose him. And like, what were the like they'll put out fake
Oh,
coins.
the Trump bucks.
Yeah, the Trump bucks. Then they put out these coins, and they'll have Donald Trump holding a coin with his face on it. It's not even a real coin. It's not got silver or gold in
And
it,
it's not him.
and he
That,
didn't endorse it.
he didn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think those are, so there's a level of infiltrator versus, which is like a like a secret kind of infiltration, but then there are people who are infiltrators.
Yeah.
Can you explain that difference if you wanted to?
I think I got lost in where you're going there. The
Well, I mean, just
infiltrators in
like
terms of
who I mean, what do we look for in real infiltrators? I mean, we already just sort of talked about the QFS crypto scamming, which is
oh
a
yeah.
secret kind of organization, but talk about infiltrators and what that really means there.
Okay, I think so. In one hand, you have like the grifter who's coming in to take advantage of a group. On the other hand, you have an infiltrator who's coming in to betray a group. Is that what
Right.
you're
Yeah.
making a distinction of?
Yeah.
And so there are people that are doing that. And, to me, that's the hardest one is like, who do you trust? Who do you know is who they say they are? Right now, I don't trust anybody. I trust literally 0 people in Washington, D.C., nobody in Congress. I don't trust anybody. And, whenever they say something and it doesn't happen, I don't trust them. And that
Yeah.
coming back to the NESARA piece, so many people that are out there really building a name for themselves and a huge following, and what they say never happens. When people start giving dates and they start saying it's going to happen by this date and this is what just happened this past weekend, then there's no evidence for that. And people say, oh well, we flipped over to a gold standard on, I'm picking a date here, but January 20th, and there's no evidence for that. And I've been hearing that for 5 years, and it's just not true. So I think those are the infiltrators. They're betraying people, they're actually misleading people, and they're building a following so that people will trust them. I think an important distinction here is understanding human psychology. People will do anything for people that they know, like, and trust. And
Right.
if somebody can come into a community and get people to like you and to trust you, then what they do is they set their guard down. And the moment they set their guard down, now you can actually infiltrate and you can inject information into them. And
Yeah.
what's happening. And unfortunately, we really don't know. Nobody walks around with a big banner that says traitor. There was a big church out in Kansas City talking about infiltrators. It's a really large church. Right now, they're going through it with their pastor who's
Oh,
with
yeah.
lots of women and underage women for like 20 plus years. Well, if he walked around with a sign that says pedo, nobody would take him seriously. So, when you think about infiltration, Satan doesn't infiltrate with a banner. He infiltrates by looking like you and getting people to know you and like you and trust you. So you
Right.
have to put up your discernment.
And I think the reality is, hey, listen, man, I've shared with people, like, even a few years ago, I think it's going to happen the next few weeks. Well, that was, me kind of, sensing something, but it was another step along the way. And that's what we have found, and Jeremy's been in that too. He's sensed another step along the way. When we look backward on it, it was a step. It wasn't the final step, too. So there's an issue of perceptions that are happening versus actual. I'm giving you a date, and that to me is a difficult part.
Yeah.
And trust me, I mean, I really try to stay away from it. I mean, I pray. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I have thought it was going to happen by an end of a year or something like that. Hey, listen, that was, realizing there was a step there. And the thing I would say to you, no matter what, is this is a war. This is why we're going through it, and we're looking at it from inside the war. It's
Yeah.
incredibly hard to do it that way.
Yeah. And I want to say, before people say, come back and make the accusation that I'm tearing down all the truthers or whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying be very discerning. I have people that are involved in the NESARA process that are pretty high up. I believe this is happening based on the people that I know.
Right.
And many of them, I mean, I can name 3 of them right now that on various dates, they thought it was going to be done.
Right.
But part of their stuff was complete. It didn't actually mean that the whole thing was complete. So just because you get misinformation for dates doesn't mean the person is not authentic. I think you have to look at the people and look at their track record and say, are they consistently wrong? And then do they spin it? Do they try to come behind it and not own it? That's a
Yeah.
big one to me when people say, oh, well, I didn't really mean that. Well, yeah, you did. Just
Did.
admit it that you were off.
Right. I mean, and trust me, I mean, I would have done this back in 2020. I'd have done it in 2021, 2022. No
Yeah.
question. Okay. But what happens there, that doesn't actually mean, I'm gonna bring up the next one. That doesn't mean a fraud issue with that too. A fraud is that's a powerful term of what I would put together is misinformation versus just frankly some levels of disinformation or even a perception that was wrong. Perceptions and disinformation isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is just misunderstood. Whereas
100%.
misinformation goes in a real nefarious way. So
Yeah.
when you think about that, you're mentioning it. So, like, what are some of those lessons from the fraud? And you've sort of said it, but some of the other lessons you might come up with.
Well, one of the things I want to really emphasize here is people are human. We make human mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. And when the public,
I don't make mistakes. What are you talking about?
well, but those around you do. What ends up happening is our society, they hold everybody to such a standard of perfection that when we misstep or we misspeak or we misunderstood something,
Right.
then they immediately label you as a fake or as a fraud. There's a big difference in defrauding somebody and making a human error. I make human errors all the time. In my trade analysis, stuff looks like something's going to do one thing
Right.
and then it doesn't. That's not because I'm trying to be deceptive. It's just the nature of the market. It's just the nature of the way things go. And
Correct.
especially when we're sitting here trying to discern various truths, we're always going to be, maybe running down a wrong rabbit hole this way or that way. There's a big difference in making a human mistake and owning it and being a person who is intentionally misleading people. And I think that's what people on the, your audience, all of us have to really get tuned into. Number one, the word that I often throw around, two words, discernment and abdicate. Like everybody needs to become very familiar with the definition of abdicate. What does it mean? We would not actually be here if society as a whole had learned the definition of the word abdicate. And the word means to give somebody else the responsibility. We're abdicating our responsibility to someone else. Well, what our society has done is we've abdicated our responsibility for journalism over to the media. And we said, well, they are the experts. We're going to trust them. We've abdicated our responsibility for financial awareness and financial intelligence. And we've said, well, we're going to trust these financial advisors. Well, it turns out that maybe they didn't really know what they were talking about. Maybe they weren't intentionally deceptive, but it didn't mean that they were actually the person we should be trusting. So I'll throw out a statistic for you. SPIVA, it's called the SPIVA study. SP Global does it every year. They've done it for, I don't know, 30 years. Don't quote me on that date. That may be wrong. But you know, it's a long, long time. They have at least 20 years of data because the study I'm going to show you is at least 20 years. But they update it every year. The percentages shift like 0.5%, maybe 1%. And the last one I read, the last one I looked at over a 20-year period of time, 20 years, I think it was 94% of financial fund managers, professional fund managers cannot match or beat the S&P 500. So what that means, let me translate that. That means that the people that you're abdicating your financial investments to in an investment fund over 20 years, they are not even matching what would happen if you simply bought the stocks in the S&P 500 and left it for 20 years. They're not even matching that, which is a complete dereliction of duty.
That's a super powerful one because, you know, I used to do this now when I had the financial planner, and some people have heard my story, but when he fired me when I was trying to get out of the market, had a freaking
you called me that day. You're like,
yeah, I called you.
I
was like, oh, I was pissed, you know, and he knows it. But what happens in there is what I had done is I would look at every single fund that I had, which happens in, you know, good diversification. I would put them in my iPhone, bring up the exact one, and know that I was on the right one. So I would put them in there, and then I would track them over the, you know, last year. I wouldn't do it over a month of a period of time. Track it over the year. Then I would compare that to, you know, because most of these were NASDAQ funds, I would compare it to the overall NASDAQ part. And I'm going, okay, this is massively slower. Now, if I knew it was a slow growth, then I would go, well, it's okay. But if it was going in the negative direction versus the rest of the NASDAQ, I'm going, this has got to be deleted. Which, and again, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, from a fund standpoint, not every fund is going to match the benchmark, but here's my point. This is what I always tell people. Why are you paying on average 2%? Typically it's 2% of your fund, of your investment value. So if somebody had $100,000, generally they're paying about $2,000 a year to the fund manager. And this fund manager is not doing as well as you could do if you just simply bought the S&P ETF, which is SPY. If you just buy SPY and hold it for 20 years, you'll do as well as that guy. Right. So that's the dereliction of duty that, you know, they never disclaim that. You know, if you walked into your average Edward Jones or whoever, I'm not picking on Edward Jones, but if you just walked into your average investment house, they're not going to say, hey, 94% of our people over 20 years can't match the S&P. They're going to say last year we did this. Well, over a short period of time, it's, you know, it's like 50%. It's pretty close. But as you go longer and longer over time, those results get worse and worse. And over time, it adds up. I discovered this with my mom because my mom brought me some money that she had with a financial planner and investment guy. And the stats didn't line up to what the market was doing. The Qs or the NASDAQ had more than doubled during the time period that she had her money with this guy. Her money had grown 8%. So she was growing about 1% a year, a little over 1% a year. He was taking about that 1% in management fees. Her money wasn't going anywhere. And if she had just simply bought the index, she would have doubled her money.
Right.
Why aren't people educated that way? Why are we paying 2% for terrible results?
Right. And again, get me right here. Okay. I mean, understand me correctly, guys. The reality, what Jeremy's trying to say is that, I put below here, a patriot is a researcher. Okay. I'm not saying you have to be Jeremy level understanding of, for that expert level, but have a intelligent conversation with him, regarding what's going on or what your goals are, and have those goals, because we're talking about your retirement in essence. I mean, so why wouldn't you have, like, these are my goals, this is what I have, this is where I'm going, this is why I'm going, these are my feelings on this, these are my expectations and my hope, what do I need to know
Yeah.
is a
On,
start.
on that line, I see you put up the definition of a patriot as a researcher. Going back to what started this, which was the conversation of fraud, what can we learn from the fraudsters? Don't abdicate your responsibility. I don't want people to abdicate it to me. They shouldn't abdicate it to you. They don't abdicate it to CNN or Fox News or any of the truthers on the internet. You go out there and you say, is this true? Everything that I put out there, the study that I just mentioned, it's a factual study. Go out and look at it. Then you can take that and you can say, would I do better with this on my own? Would I do better with my news if I were to research it on my own? Would I do better with my money if I researched it on my own? Learn to take responsibility. The American dream, if we think about the American dream, it's not to buy a house and to own land. The American dream was individualism, rugged individualism, our ability to come to this land, go conquer. You live in Oklahoma. I lived out there for many years. And I remember in Oklahoma history where we learned about the land rush in
Right.
1889. And we reenacted, it was 100-year, it was 1989 when I was there. And we reenacted the 100-year anniversary of that. But you could go out and capture the land. Well, it was great. It was free land. There's just one thing that we give up with that. When you give up the fact that you have to go buy the land, well, now you got it for free, but now you're responsible to develop it and to turn it into something. And that's what people forget about the American dream. We want our freedom, but with great freedom comes great responsibility. And if we're going to abdicate that responsibility over to the news media or to your financial planners or to go down the list, your
Right.
theologians, you just go down the list of people that have been abdicated your responsibility to, and then you play that out for 50 years. You say, how do we get here as a society? We didn't learn the definition of abdicate. We did
Right.
not take our personal responsibility. So I think in the overall movement, if there's one lesson to take, is learn to be responsible. Quit blaming others. It's like John Kennedy said, not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country? That's taking responsibility.
Well, and I think you just said it. I mean, it was called the Declaration of Independence because you declared it, means you speak it out. When you speak things into existence, God spoke the world into existence. He didn't take his hammer and nail out. So that's a declaration of your independence, which is part of the responsibility with it too. So that goes that direction. But as we jump forward here, we're going to kind of move into some of our other areas. So talk to me about the real truth about gold and silver-backed IRAs, because that was one of your big heartstrings out there.
Well, in our conversation that we had a few days ago, the fraud that we talked about, the fraudster, came up, and part of the fraud that he perpetrated, he was having people close out their 401ks and convert them to a gold-backed IRA under two false premises. Number one false premise, the market's going to crash, your dollar's going to zero, and if you don't do this, you're not going to have anything. So that's all fear. And then the other false premise is gold's going to skyrocket, and a year from now, you're not going to be able to do this. Two just bold-faced, ignorant lies. And I say ignorant because they were not founded in truth. So if it's not founded in truth, it's ignorance. Without people researching, without them understanding what was really happening, they followed this person blindly, converted their 401ks into gold-backed IRAs. Then they get their statement a month or two later, their $100,000 turned into 60 or 50. In the case of what he was doing, the haircut or the spread was like a 40 to 45% spread. It was terrible. And of course, gold's been running into a resistance for the last forever. So if people were converting at the top and then that resistance, the market pushes the prices back down, they get their statement 2 or 3 months later, they already had that 40% spread. And now suddenly the price of gold has dropped it just looks like an enormous spread, and they feel like, oh, I'll never get back to break even. So that was the premise that led to that question, the real truth about gold and silver-backed IRAs. So what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about how it works, or do you want
Well,
to talk
I
about
mean,
my opinions on it?
on a basic level, when they have, I mean, and I have a gold and silver backed IRA. I mean, I moved some of that money with that too. I also did it a lot earlier than most people, and that's been my only growth point out there too. So that is part of it. And people go, well, yeah, but that's a certificate, and I get it. I understand. I understand exactly what it is, and understand what the risks are, just like having a risk of having a piece of gold in your fingertips with that too, which
Yeah.
has some of that as well. I get it. But when we talk about that, there was a point that you brought up, and I think is powerful in there, is that there are not just commissions, but actual amounts based upon that commission. So if in the recent past we were at $1,900 for an ounce of gold, what might that have been for you? And that is the caveat that people, when they get into it, they go, wait, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so I would love to educate on this right now. Let me clarify. You said you have a certificate, so you don't have. Did you buy
Uh,
physical, or you
I
bought?
didn't have physical on that particular one.
So you
It
bought
was,
like a gold ETF or something
yeah,
of that nature?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was a moving of part of the IRA without having to pay the tax points on
Yeah.
that issue, and totally get it. I mean, I'm not saying it's the perfect. I'm just telling you it's
Well, I
one.
want to be clear. That's why you're making money. That's actually why you're making money. And so I hope when you go through and you tag this video, make sure that this section is like really tagged and pull it out as excerpts, because this is what people really need to hear. I get on my Telegram channel people coming over from other truthers, and they hear me talk about gold or silver, and they immediately flip out and they're like, oh, I've been ruined. I can't believe I did this terrible thing. I knew it was bad. Listen, audience, please do not freak out. What we're going to have to do right here is just deal with facts and information. So let me kind of decipher some stuff. The first thing I want to decipher, and you can kind of keep me on track if I drift too far here. Let's talk about what is a gold IRA, gold-backed physical IRA versus paper, or versus a certificate. So I often use the exchange traded fund called, it's ticker symbol GLD, which trades the gold commodity. That would be a paper example. Well, GLD, if you look at gold itself, let's go from October 2022. I'm looking at a chart over here from October 2022 to current. Gold itself is up from about $1,600 an ounce to around $2,000. So we'll call it $400 an ounce. Round numbers here. Okay. The GLD ETF, which holds gold, there in that same time period, is up the same percentage, but the dollar amount moves from $150 a share up to around $187 a share. So it's the same percentage. It's just inside of an ETF. And if your listeners don't know what an ETF is, it stands for exchange traded fund. It's like a mutual fund, but it trades on the exchange like a stock. That's all it is. And for people who want to learn more about that, I actually have a course that's a free course, really, really easy to move into that. It's called Raging Profits with ETFs.
And which is where you can go and look at jeremywhaley.com.
And you just start
can find
learning about ETFs and how useful they are, because this is how you get out of the system, is to learn that you have all the tools. You can do it all yourself.
Right.
So what you were talking about is, you say that your guy moved you into gold inside an IRA, moved you to gold, what we would call paper gold. Okay.
Right.
It has gone up. Those numbers I just said are real. Whatever that number is, 25% roughly. Roughly 25%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over 2 years. Okay, great. It's up. Now, here's the problem. A gold-backed IRA can look like two different things. So if people are making notes, write this down. One is a gold-backed IRA that is holding physical gold in a vault somewhere in the mountains of, I don't know, wherever. The other is what Scott described, which is a gold IRA, or gold-backed IRA, that is holding paper gold in the form of an ETF or some other variation of that. They're very different. The costs associated with them are very different. The only commonality is the term IRA, which stands for individual retirement account. So what people need to understand is IRA is a structure. So let's start there. IRA is a tax structure that the government recognizes. There are different types of IRAs. A Roth IRA, you pay taxes on the front end, but you can trade it and make money on it tax-free forever. And after 59 and a half, you make as much money in there as you want to. You pull it out tax-free. You can trade your active trades in a Roth IRA tax-free. Pull your money out every week if you want to, tax-free after 59 and a half. That is a structure. That is no different than in a corporate structure, an LLC versus an S Corp versus a C Corp.
Right.
IRA is a tax structure, period. Now, with that knowledge, what do you put in the IRA? Inside that IRA, you could hold individual stocks like Apple or Microsoft or IBM. You can hold exchange traded funds that would have gold, such as GLD, which is what you've described. Or you can actually work with a company that that holds physical golds. I'm just going to throw some out, like a Gold Line, or a lot of your listeners are in 7K Metals. They have a company that does that actually has vaults with gold. When you get into those kind of things, there's a company behind it that has a vault somewhere with real physical gold. And in theory, your gold is supposed to have a serial number. You could go visit it, hug it, kiss it, love it, whatever you want to do, right? That is a physical gold-backed IRA. So we understand the two differences now, right? The where people get off, you with a paper gold IRA, tax structures the IRA, you made money because gold increased.
Right.
What you did not have is all the costs associated with physical gold. And that's why people are losing money, and they don't understand why they're losing money, because there's a ton of cost associated with physical gold.
But there's also now what people will complain to me or beat me up about, when I've said that in the past, is I found the tranche of all my IRA, my simple IRA that my practice is set up, and I'd already had some in there, and I found that tranche when I looked at that particular area, and they were like, yeah, but if the company goes out of business, then then you're screwed from that number. And I'm like, I understand. I mean, the only way that would really happen, when I looked at what that structure was, is basically for the economy to 100% fail, which is part of fraud conversations that people have, because you guys want to be scared about the country being failing, which I would term, and Jeremy's right along there, is fear porn. It's pornography in many ways, because what it does is it brings you back to this, and inside of your emotions, you're going to make irrational choices. And the answer is, if Scott's backed IRA point, I mean, that we're talking about here, it has a smattering gold and silver, by the way. If that thing goes to sorry, but hell in a handbasket, basically, the whole country is more than likely screwed at this point. And what happens if it goes to zero, and it's not just going to affect this, it's going to start filtering out, and we are in an absolute anarchy state in that way too. So that's a different conversation. Now, of course, if you have the physical gold in your hands, you have a much more valuable asset. But what Jeremy's telling you, obviously, is there are commissions and fees and shipping and all the other stuff that comes along with it.
Yes. And that's where people get off. So if you were to, and if somebody is truly addicted, I'm going to read something here. I'm pulling it up, not trying to look off camera, but I'm going to read something to you in a minute. If people are truly just so addicted to the fear that you're afraid you're going to lose everything, don't put it in a gold-backed IRA. Literally, if that's what's driving you,
sure,
you buy the physical gold and silver and you put it in a vault in your basement. That's the only way that you're going to have the safety that you can hug your silver the way that you want to. Because I'm telling you, there are companies that are custodians of your physical gold and silver that if one day they were to go under, a lot of people would still lose their physical gold and silver, even though supposedly you can't. So just understand, if you're being driven by fear, you're making bad decisions. And that's that. So let's come back to the whole abdication and where people got off. People abdicated to so-called experts, and there's a lot of them. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki is talking about, you know, you need to be buying gold and silver, and there's so many people that are focused on gold and silver. It's an easy conversation to get lost in. Here's what they do not disclaim to you. If you will dig into the details, it's there. We're just going to educate here. When you buy physical gold or silver, there are always two costs that you never see. One is the purchase cost, and one is the cost that happens when you sell. The purchase cost is going to be spot price of gold plus whatever spread that retailer has to cover. So it just depends on when it is, but that spread is typically about 20%.
Right.
Okay. So hypothetically, if the price of gold, the spot price is $2,000 an ounce, you're probably going to be paying about $2,200 an ounce. Okay?
Right.
That's just that. It is what it is. Now, understand.
And so therefore it better go up to at least $2,200 for you to break even. And that isn't full breaking even. It probably is going to be more because of other fee points.
Right. And I just threw out the wrong numbers. I said 20% and I gave a 10% number.
Yeah.
But
right.
It would be $2,400 an ounce.
24. Right. Yeah. Right. Sorry.
But then when you go back to sell it, they're not going to pay you $2,400 an ounce. They're going to pay you spot price minus a spread on the bottom. Okay.
Right.
Now all trades work this way. If you go buy Apple, you go buy Microsoft, right. Tesla, any stock, there's going to be what they call the bid ask spread. It's going to be 1 or 2 pennies because it's paper and it's easy. It's all digital. But when you're dealing with something physical, like physical gold, there's a ton of costs involved with it. So their spread is really bad or really wide. And it ends up being about somewhere between 25 and 30% total.
And so
both sides of it.
I would put it to people in another type of terminology. And I'm going to do the crazy analogy that it's actually been happening since 2021. The auto industry was overpricing their cars. Then the banking industry, because of COVID points that they were doing, the banking industry was giving out these loans. And then people were going, wait a second, I can't really afford this, truck that's $100,000 truck, for instance. This has happened a lot. And that truck, its actual MSRP is $70K. But in normal timeframes, that $70K truck could be discounted down to 50s or 58, 62 kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
What would happen, but you drove it off the lot with $100,000, and that doesn't even include, the front end interest of payments that you've gone on. You walk back in 6 months, you're not getting 100,000. You're not even getting the 70 or 60. You're getting a discounted rate below that. So your trade value is so underwater that it takes you years to get back into that. That's the same thing here.
It's an interesting metaphor. The difference in most people's
an overall basis of numbers.
You're right. I mean, the difference in people's mind is people associate when you drive a vehicle off the lot as that vehicle lost value, and people associate that the gold or silver shouldn't. Here's the truth. Neither one of them lost value. What you didn't realize in both cases is you're paying a retail price. Right. You're paying value plus whatever the spread is. You say, well, why would it cost so much? They're just greedy gold dealers. Well, actually, when was the last time you tried to build a vault that could house all of that gold? And when was the last time you paid for the security to house and protect all of that gold? And by the way, when was the last time that you transferred gold in large amounts across the country and had it insured and made sure that it got to its delivery? You see, from a business standpoint, there's actually a lot of cost involved with physical gold, which is the very reason that we end up with paper money, because there's so much expense in tangible money. Hard asset is very impractical to transfer. Right. I'm going to put a reference out here. You might put it in the links, maybe. There's a podcast. I'm going to remember the name of it. It's called the What is Money Show. And the guy's name is Breedlove. Forgot his first name, but he had Michael Saylor he did a whole series with Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor goes through I think it was like 8 or 10 episodes, just a whole like 5,000-year history of money, humanity, and how society got to this point, and ultimately leading up to why Bitcoin is so efficient. And he goes through all of this process of the cost associated and the impracticality associated with physical metals as a medium of exchange. It's valuable because it's metal. It's valuable because it doesn't lose its value in and of itself, but the practicality of moving it, of moving, let's say, what we would equate to $1 million worth of gold from point A to point B, much less from New York to Paris. The practicality of moving that much gold is so expensive and so impractical. Therefore, paper is practical. So you have the exchange. That's what the notes are for. The exchange, this note exchanges for this amount of gold. Now, of course, they turn that to fiat, but that's what the true nature of paper money is.
It's called currency.
It's called currency.
Called currency. And again, currency could have been ketchup packets. It's my favorite statement. And if it was that important, then it could be ketchup packets. So don't get too off on that too.
Before we move on, can I just put the last button on this? The last button on this whole gold-backed IRA. I want you to understand, if you're looking at doing that, here's the disclosure that they're not telling you. If you had $100,000 and you go buy what they're going to sell you is $100,000 worth of gold, tomorrow you want to sell that back. If you want to sell that back, it's going to be worth about 70.
Right.
That's not because gold crashed. It's because the cost associated to it. Therefore, to get back to break even, gold has to go up the difference of 70 to 100, which is 30%. So from right now, putting that in real terms, gold would have to go from about $2,000 an ounce to $2,600 an ounce, just so you break even. Can you do it? Yes. Am I saying that gold-backed IRAs are a terrible idea? No, I am not saying that. Do not, please, nobody quote me on that.
And that's not the
just
point.
Know what you're dealing with.
And frankly, he's even intimating that I've done some of this stuff too. As I have a little physical stuff around, and I have some paper stuff. Well, that's called diversification with that too. So that's
which
part
King
of it.
Solomon taught.
Right.
What did he say in Ecclesiastes? Invest in 8 things, because you never know which one's going to work.
Exactly. So as we kind of transition here, so now that we kind of have a basic understanding of gold with that too, what will happen with gold prices after NESARA moves to the USN? And I do want to share, some people want, now gold's 2,000-ish today. Okay. I mean, don't know the exact number, but close. There are some people who are predicting, crazy, idiotic numbers of $50,000 to $100,000. That would blow out the economy. And frankly, that would be a messed up circumstance. That some of that stuff is based upon their concept of the St. Germain funds and the Rodriguez trusts and all these other trusts that are around NESARA point. But that would be if we're going to use all of that money today. And that would be stupid. That's like if I said I have all my assets of the world and I'm going to use that to base upon what I'm making today. Well, that would be a problem. Okay. But if I want to spread that out over the lifetime, then I've utilized that amount, which means that that price has to be much more in line with a more reasonable nature based upon economic points with that too. So again, what will happen with gold prices after NESARA moves is to the USN or the US note with that too.
So understanding logic, there's always presumptions. So assuming A, then B. But the question then becomes, is A verifiable? So we're going to make some assumptions here, because some people who say that gold's going to be those extreme prices that you mentioned, or silver is going to be worth XYZ.
Right.
They're making a different presumption. So, your listeners right now are going to listen to this, and some people are going to say, oh, well, Jeremy's wrong. Such and such is right. I trust such and such. Well, the question is, what's their presumptions versus what are my presumptions? So I'm going to make some presumptions here and set the stage. If what you and I've talked about is true, if the truth about NESARA or whatever they call that publicly. If that truth comes out and they replace the US dollar with a new asset-backed US note, there's the presumption. If that is true, then what is also true is the price of gold and the price of silver will absolutely not skyrocket, period. And you have to understand this from it's not even an economic term. It's just fact. I mean, it's the way it works, because what they're going to do, we'll just use 2000 as the standard.
Right.
When you convert your US dollar into a new US note, if it was 1-to-1 and the price of gold at that time is 2000, that is going to be pegged. That's the price.
Right.
So you've heard people talk about in this community, they'll talk about establishing a value date. That's a very important phrase that people don't understand what that means.
Yes.
Establishing a value date means they are saying, boom, here's the value today. The US note exchanges for gold at $2,000 an ounce. That is the price. Now, I promise you, I will guarantee it, for the next however many years, 20, 50, 100 years, however long we stay on that gold standard, the price of gold will be 2,000 US notes per ounce. And it will not go up.
Unless there's some significant change, so
It will only go up in the event that they devalue the currency the way that they did it in the 1930s.
Well, but it would necessarily go up if we saw a supply and demand, or the amount that we have in gold.
No,
would that not
it
be the
can't.
case?
No, because understand, what is the note? What is currency? If you go back to the original currency, what is a note? A note says this 20 notes is convertible at $2,000
X number.
At X number. So the only way that the number for gold goes higher is if that currency is not worth as much. So the only way that you would see the price of gold going higher is if there's a built-in inflation. If they say, well, we're going to devalue the dollar by 5% a year, then okay, the gold's going to go up 5% a year, but it's pegged. That's what the word pegged means.
Well, and it stabilizes. This is a stable kind of number that happens. And so,
well, it stabilizes inflation, but what we're talking about is just a very pure function.
No, stabilizes a number, right? It's not in essence, I always say this, it's not like, the 5 seconds, I believe that the EBS is an initial point, and then as Trump, is back in office, and the reality of what he's doing, and I would love to say they say NESARA, but more than likely they'll probably say these programs are coming out, and they're explaining some issues. And frankly, Trump has actually talked about some of those issues. He talks about, student loans, and he talks about universities and ... But what happens is that 5 seconds after, and just to do the Scott number here, okay, if it's 2,000 and it's pegged at $5,000, you think that you can go, when you hear announcement of NESARA, that you can run out and buy the gold at $2,000. Correct?
No. Well, okay, so now it's natural because we deal with dollars, but I'm being distinctive to say 2,000 notes. Right. Now let's go over here. Let's go with the presumption, the dollar amount. Well, the moment the US note is announced, then all the people who say the dollar is going to collapse are accurate. That dollar becomes worthless, and now it might take 20,000 or 100,000 US dollars to equal an ounce of gold, because gold is now, in all of our currency, is operating on this gold standard with the US note. So use this metaphor. It's a totally different metaphor, but I think people can connect with it. If you go to a nice restaurant and you hand the valet your keys to your car, he's going to give you a ticket that says you get back in exchange for this your vehicle.
Without any dents in it.
Without any dents in it. Okay. Now let's say that you go eat and you pull a Rip Van Winkle and you fall asleep, and 10 years later you wake up and you walk out, different valet guy, but you have the ticket, and he's like, oh, there you are. We've been waiting for you for 10 years. I know this is a ridiculous metaphor. Sure. But you say, I want my car back. He's not going to give you, let's say you turned in a BMW, you don't get a Yugo, you get your same BMW back, hopefully without any dents in it, because the paper exchanges exactly for that asset.
Right.
A note, a currency note, and I'm using that term specifically because that's what it is. It is supposed to be convertible exactly to what you've exchanged for it. So
Right.
whenever we first went to paper currency, people had all this gold. They didn't want to lug it around. They stored it at the bank. That note was literally your deposit slip saying,
Right.
here, you deposited 20 ounces of gold. Here's your deposit slip. Now you can go withdraw that and say, I want my 20 ounces of gold back. Or you can just hand Scott your piece of paper for 20 ounces of gold. And Scott says, thank you. It's as good as gold. There's the key phrase, as good as gold.
Which is the initialization was physical, these physical pieces of paper that had all kinds of writing and junk like that on it. But then we moved to another thing called a check because it was too thick to have all those bills. So you wrote a check. And then we transitioned over into credit cards that had a particular number. But then that's when it got really crazy because we have all kinds of fees and debts points related to the credit card, where the check is a direct lineage point to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, a check is exactly. So here's what I want to say to your audience. For those of you in the audience that are just counting the days for your gold to skyrocket to $50,000 an ounce, you don't want that, because if that happens with presumption A, which is we're going to a gold-backed U.S. note, with that presumption, if then gold skyrocketed to say 50,000 notes an ounce, then your brand new notes that you're excited to get just became as worthless as your US dollars. So no, you do not want gold at that price, not in the new US notes. Now, I do think if you take out presumption A, and if you change presumption A to the presumption that either we're not going to a US note or we did, and now we're just going to see what the dollar's worth, there will be a time period probably where you can exchange dollars while it is falling in value.
Well, and we know that. I mean, we know that happens in history, like you're talking about. But we know that there will be a time when the people of the world will walk in with their $500 that they threw in the back door or whatever, and they will take those $500. And here's the point of NESARA is to jump over and give that guy $500.
Notes.
I mean, 500.
We'll call it
notes, right? So instead of dollars, it says
notes. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Exactly, you're going that way. But it is a 1-to-1 ratio point that happens.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to kind of share this with you guys. And while it gets a little confusing here, I don't believe either that we're going to see it be at $50,000 or $100,000, because that, first off, that is a nutty number in a million ways. Now we do know this one thing: at $2,000, the price has been really suppressed. So there has been a suppression, silver and gold, and we know some of that because supply and demand point. The question will be always, what's that number? Is it $2,500? Is it $5,000? Is it, and actually one of the things I found in my book, Revelations of the Red Pill, this woman back in, I'm going to get the exact date wrong. I have it in here, but it was basically 20, 30 years ago, or maybe even 35 years ago. She had predicted, when the price of gold was 386 at the time frame, she had predicted that if you delete the Fed and you don't let the government necessarily have a role based upon Fed points, gold would actually be valued around, and she put it, I want to say $2,500 at that time. But that's also with economic conditions the way it is with that too. So she was talking about how much it might be compressed as well. So that's just a kind of point with that too. So let's just flip over in here and say, when we hear this kind of thing, would there be a dollar? Well, is a dollar crash real that some of the fraudsters pitch?
I think what concerns me about a quote unquote dollar crash is a hypothetical scenario where BRICS, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all the whatever that number is, I think it's like 60 or 70 countries now. If they succeed in getting the BRIC currency, which is not real yet,
Right.
if that becomes the new world reserve currency, and so here we're dealing with presuppositions again. If the BRIC becomes the world reserve currency and the US dollar is not replaced by a US note, then you see a dollar crash.
Yeah, it would screw everyone. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
that would be a scenario where those variables creates a worst case scenario.
yeah, and even when you think about dollar crash, what that would actually mean, and I keep going back to that, that would be post-apocalyptic, guys. I mean, that's even different and worse than the Great Reset, because the
Yeah,
Great
and to the fear mongers, the people who just love fear,
right.
and it genuinely is a addiction. And I have something I want to read to you before we're done today about that, but not right now. But for people who just love to focus on the fear, and it releases that dopamine and the cortisone and all this stuff in your body, understand this: when you preach doomsday and you recount that over and over again, what you're not realizing is these other countries, they need us. They don't need all the BRICS countries need the United States to be profitable.
Absolutely.
If the United States goes down, China does not do well.
Yep.
Russia does not do well. What
Yep.
they're doing right now, I don't know if you saw those Tucker Carlson interviews, really, really interesting, his interview with Putin, but the follow-up videos that he's pushed out on X, everybody should go watch them. He's done a expose, a 5-minute walk through a grocery store, and they go through the grocery store.
Change in pricing. It's crazy.
Right. So they go through the grocery store, and to buy all these groceries, he said they all agreed it would be about $400 US. Well, it equaled $100 US in Russian rubles.
Right.
They did the same thing with McDonald's and food and different things, and they were able to buy 2 cheeseburgers and fries and chocolate cake for the equivalent of $7 US. Here's why that's important. What did Russia do 2 years ago? They stabilized their currency by pegging it to gold,
and
it stops inflation.
And here's the thing, and we're going to do this. I'm gonna give you a caveat here in a second. But what happened around that same time frame, nearly 2 years ago, was the Ukrainian war. And you go, why did that happen around the time frame that maybe BRICS was was floating out there? Which I believe that BRICS is a direct irritated response of NESARA not happening yet. I'm 1000% belief in that point. So it's basically just SARA. These people are signing up and they're creating just SARA, but they don't have all the features. They just have the currency of each one of those nations with that too. But what Jeremy is saying here, and I want you to refocus on there, if BRICS or even every one of the countries having her individual points of currencies that they would occur, if they delete the dollar and kill it and crash it, the world does what? I mean, what happens to the rest of the world?
They crap their pants. I mean, here's what happens if the US consumption disappears, China suffers. Go to your local Walmart.
Right.
Every one of those consumable goods can't be consumed because the United States citizen doesn't have the money to consume it. Therefore, just look at made in. Where's it made? If it's from China, China's suffering. If it's from Taiwan, Taiwan's suffering. If it's from the Philippines, Philippines are suffering. If it's from Mexico, all these countries are dependent on the US consumption. For better or worse, that's what happened with globalization. When you globalize the economy, now everything is intermingled. So if the US goes down, China goes down. So actually, in the trade war, the truth is it's kind of a catch-22 for China. China can't take the US out. They need the US. None of these countries can take us out. They need us. And that is the benefit of globalization. The benefit is there's a mutual It's kind of like the doctrine of mutual destruction, you know, back in the Cold War. It's like, well, if you do this, you're going to suffer. Okay, well, we won't do that. So
But I think the reality that we've got to catch here, guys, and we're gonna we're gonna end this one. I'm gonna have Jeremy back on another podcast, so we will do this here. But one of the reasons what I want you to see with a dollar crash, it wouldn't just be a recession. It would not be a Great Depression. We're talking complete anarchy. We would have what would really occur if the dollar crashed and they threw it to the ground, the rest of the economies would absolutely nearly cease to exist within a very short time frame. And we would have, and what the responses would be is a maybe a literal nuclear war kind of thing, because they wouldn't know what to do. I mean, governments would cease to exist. There's a game that I played
just
on.
think of the BLM, the summer of
Oh
BLM,
yeah,
and multiply it times a million.
a million. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I had this exact same. There's a game of on my iPad that has these infection, and you can infect the world in different ways, and you see
You're
how the
sick.
path is.
You're
Yeah, I know,
sick.
crazy go. And what happens is that when it starts to do that, what happens is it wipes out, not just wipes out the population, but then it wipes out the ability to do anything, and everything shuts down. And so that's where we would talk about. So guys,
And
don't.
let's define dollar crash too. Dollar crash, we're talking Weimar Republic, we're talking
Yeah,
Venezuela
right,
level crash. So it's not like it just goes to zero. It's just the buying power is zero.
right.
And because that you don't have the consumption of the US economy. Without the US economy's consumption, the whole world economy just comes to a grinding halt.
And then
And
and
it
then we
doesn't
have
serve anybody.
war.
So then let's go back to presumptions. If we presume the so-called white hats are in control, are you really foolish enough to think that those white hats who are in control are going to bring the whole world to a grinding halt?
Right.
No. Just stop with the fear porn.
Right. And so I think that's a powerful point, because what that would do is any military expert would understand is that it literally means war. And I mean, I'm not talking
It's
about war
worse
like,
than war. It would just be anarchy is the right term. You just have so much looting, murder. I
yeah.
mean, it would never get under control. It would.
And that is why we have President Trump, who is our CIC and not idiot,
Yeah.
up there. And the reality is because, and we also have a white hat military that knows this stuff. I mean, and they have they have financial, real smart people to deal with this. So stop with that fear porn with that too. And I just kind of want to end it with this part one. We didn't think we were going to do part one, but I really want you guys to look at jeremywhaley.com. I mean, come back and check it out, because I think that we can make a real big difference with that.
Soon, Scott, I'll go ahead and preview this. And I do have one thing I want to add to this one before we
Sure.
wrap it, but I'll preview this. I'm almost done with my book, Building Your Financial Fortress for Life. And as soon
Oh,
as that's done, I'll have a free download on the site there. So it's not there yet. I don't know when this video is going to go up, but hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be done with that and people can download that. I want to read this just in talking about abdication and taking responsibility and being persuaded. It reminded me in that conversation we had, in the last 45 minutes, whenever it was, of something that came out on the internet years ago by a guy named Blair. I think it was Blair Singer is his name. Blair Warren is his name. And it was called the One Sentence Persuasion Course. And I want to share this with your audience, because if you read this, are you familiar with this?
no, but I just love the name. So I mean, that's why I'm laughing at the
So it
name.
came out as a course on how to persuade your audience to buy anything. That's what it came out as. But this one sentence that I'm going to share with you does more to describe where society is and help people understand, how do you discern the fraud? How do you break through the noise? How do you become responsible? I'm going to share this with you right here. Okay. So I'm going to read it to you. You guys can go Google this One Sentence Persuasion, and Blair Warren is the guy who did it, and give him full credit for it. So here's the sentence. And he says this, he says, you can understand sales, you can understand influence in one sentence. And it goes like this: people will do anything for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicions, and help them throw rocks at their enemies. Now, understand those. Encourage dreams, justify failures, allay fears, confirm suspicions, throw rocks at enemies. You want to understand how some of these fraudsters can go out there and grift and get people to know them, like them, trust them, buy them. They encourage dreams. Hey, you're going to get this huge windfall profit when NESARA happens. You're going to get this. You're going to get that. It's all going to be wonderful. It's not your fault. Justify their failures. It's not your fault. The government has screwed you. The government did this to you. It's not your fault. Allay their fears. Look, folks, because you're listening to me, everything's going to be okay. It's all okay. Pay attention to me. Send me your money, and now your water is going to be safe. Send me your money, and now your gold is going to be backed by something tangible. You're safe. Allay the fears. Confirm their suspicions. Hey, they really were screwing you.
Yeah, look at this.
Thank God I'm here. I'm here. I'm the one. Throw rocks at their enemies. Did you see what those people did? Oh, those lousy, dirty, rotten Democrats, those lousy, dirty, rotten Republicans. And here's the thing. This sentence, if you want to understand society and you want to get out of the echo chamber, understand this sentence and put it as a filter on your life. Say, the people that I'm listening to, why am I buying them? Why am I buying into them? Why am I paying them minute by minute with my attention, which is your number one asset? You and I, Scott, have talked about how much we just unplugged from everything. I quit paying people with my attention. It's not worth it. I have too many other things to do, right? But so many people, literally millions of people, are sitting on the internet paying with their attention because they're encouraging their dreams. They're getting their dreams encouraged. They're feeling justified in their failures. Their fears are going away. Their suspicions are being confirmed. Throwing rocks at the enemies. All you did is divided. And by the way, for every one of you who's a Trump lover and throwing those rocks at the Democrat enemies, there are people over here on the other side that are doing the exact same thing. Grifters and infiltrators happen on both sides. If you truly are a truther, if you really care about what the truth is, we rise above it. You see how society behaves. You understand that. You realize where you are personally susceptible. We no longer say, well, who can I trust? We say, okay, let's discern it. Why do I trust this person? What do I like about them? What are the complaints? You know, if somebody throws out, oh, this person might have been a pedo and there's actually a court document, maybe we should dig into that. Maybe we should look at that. You know, maybe like in the case of that church, that's happening right now, this came out last fall and the Jane Does were not taken seriously. Maybe we should say, okay, you're accusing these pastors. Can we verify that? Is there really, you really have counselors that can verify that you've been talking to them for 20 years? Oh, maybe we should look into these pastors, and we should not just trust them because they encourage my dreams and they allay my fears and they confirm my suspicions and they justify my failures.
Right.
This is how you control people. This is Hitler level control. Okay. And people need to understand it happens from every side. So break through the noise right there.
It does. And reality is, you know, I stopped loving either side of any of that stuff. You know, my only love is of the word of God. My only love is of God. And then my love is the truth, which means that I will correct the snot out of myself. And I do. You have no idea how much I do that to get myself in line with something that I learn, and I need to do that. And that's kind of the awakening. That's the real awakening with that too.
It is.
So I thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And
sorry to make that so long at the end, but I think it was really valuable.
No, it's perfect. And so I thank so much. And we're going to do a part 2 of this. I had a whole list of questions and we're not going to get through them. And I want to keep it in there. I want to keep it within a line to kind of take care of you guys too. So check out, like and subscribe for the video and share it around. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.